What's going on, everybody? It is Triple Crown 24 back today doing a follow up video to my Sports Card Psychology podcast, episode 27, where I explored the idea of influencer boxes and if they are a real thing, why would any manufacturer put them out there? What would be the benefit and what would we need to keep in mind as consumers if that was truly happening? In that video, I gave the example of backyard breaks and did some rough math to kind of figure out their odds of pulling certain what I would call product hits, meaning that these are the most coveted cards in any given product. And by rough math, I mean this is the math that you do on the back of a napkin at a restaurant if you are trying to figure out how much to tip your waiter or something along those lines. And one of the key flaws in that video that I will fully admit here, and I put it in the comments section of that video as well, uh, was that it only accounted for the odds of pulling these cards if you opened up one case of a product. And that is most certainly not the case, pun not intended, uh, with backyard breaks. They open a high volume of product. So I wanted to make it a little bit more accurate. And I was discussing the video that I had put out with some people. And one of the people who I was speaking with was Ryan of Sports Card Radio. And he gave me an idea that I thought would be all right, you know what? I'm going to follow up on this. I'm going to do some more digging and I'm going to see what I can come up with here. So the next day, I contacted him again and I provided him with this document where this is my breakdown of more realistic odds of what it would actually be for backyard breaks to pull the three cards that I mentioned in the original video. Now, I feel that when you put out something in text, the tone or certain phrases or wording can be easily misinterpreted. Have you ever sent a text message where you think to yourself, oh, maybe that came off the wrong way or something? That's kind of how I feel with any kind of text document. So I thought that it would be a disservice to not follow up on that discussion since it is one that a lot of people are talking about right now. They're not specifically talking about my video or my document here, but a lot of people are kind of theorizing about this topic. And the fact that I put information out there, I wanted to follow up with this as much as possible. Disclaimer, I don't really have a side to fall on in this case. I'm not a backyard breaks fanboy. I'm not a fanboy of anybody. I don't have anything against anyone. I just wanted to do my due diligence and kind of tie a bow on something that I had previously discussed in my last video. So that is my context here. And also, what I'm going to present to you today is not perfect. It is not fully definitive. There's really no way to get something that is fully definitive. This is just my best estimate. So I wanted to go through today and examine the document that I created, tell you more about where I think the strengths are in some of these arguments I presented, and also show what maybe some of the weaknesses are or some things to consider that maybe don't jump out. I tried to make this as reader friendly as possible, so I limited the blocks of text in there. But inherently, it's not the easiest read out there. There's a lot of numbers, and without proper context, numbers could be spun any given way. So this is going to be a more detailed breakdown of this. I will try to keep it as brief as possible. Knowing me, if you do know me, I can be long-winded at times, so I will do my best to keep it as brief as possible. But I do want to be thorough at the same time. So what I did basically in this case was to pick another breaker that opened a high volume of product, someone who I could at least think would be comparable in the volume that they move. So I chose Leighton Sports Cards. And again, this video doesn't have anything to do with Leighton. It's not out to get anybody or anything. This is just to further extend the information that I provided in the last video and try to get it as accurate as possible. So I'm just putting it out there. However you want to interpret it is up to you. Leighton is one of the biggest breakers in the game. They've been around for a very long time. I do respect what Rich has built in terms of his business. And the fact that they've moved such a high volume of product would lead you to believe that they would also get similar high quality hits. In fact, I did mention it in my original video. They hit the Tom Brady green kaboom. I actually remember seeing that live It was one of the few times that I had their stream on live in the background. And I haven't really done that in recent times. So just kind of coincidence that I happened to be there that day. But it was certainly cool to see a card like that pulled. But I wanted to look at these cards specifically and see what would have been their odds to pull these specific cards based on the volume of product that they move as one of the largest breakers out there, one of the largest movers of product out there, uh, and try to put them, in comparison with backyard breaks. Now, do I know the exact number of product that backyard breaks opens? No. Otherwise, I would have used that data directly. And I don't really have a good way to estimate it where I would feel comfortable in putting that information out there. However, I think that this is a close comparison and that to move this volume of product would require a lot of money coming in. These boxes I'm talking about, Flawless, Optic, Prism, they are not cheap. So that is why I went with this example here. I felt like it was the best representation I could possibly give and the most fair representation I could possibly give. So let's actually look at the examples here. I think a lot of these I tried to make as self-explanatory as possible, but I wanted to maybe answer some questions that I think could arise from some of the math that I put out there and maybe highlight a few points that I think are important here. The LeBron triple logo, man. Uh, each of these three products have different configurations. And what I was trying to do is simplify it as much as possible. Without pack odds, Panini makes it a lot more difficult to kind of figure out what the insertion ratios are, but it's not impossible if we know that certain parallels are exclusive to certain formats. Flawless is fairly easy because there is no retail with Flawless. There's no hybrid. There's no Tmall, any of that. There is hobby and there is first off the line. So based on the first off the line parallels, specifically these diamond cards that have been known to Flawless since the product first was released many moons ago. Based on this, we can more definitively figure out the number of boxes that would be out there. So you can see the math here. I went through and I took the checklist to figure out how many diamond cards are in the product. You get one of those per briefcase, so we could figure out how many briefcases were out there, how many of them were first off the line exclusives, and then from there we can figure out how many of the memorabilia cards there are as well. There's one memorabilia card per box. Now, is there a chance that maybe there is some kind of error box where you got two memorabilia cards or you got zero memorabilia cards? Yes, that is a very real possibility. And that I think would be more problematic or more of a concern when you looked at Prism or Optic, whereas Flawless, I feel there's probably less room for error on those types of things, given how the product is configured. But it is something worth noting. Any given example of those boxes from just watching some of them being open, I would say would be negligible compared to the overall sample size. It would be well less than 1%. And in that case, they would be considered statistical outliers. So we wouldn't be able to include them in the data set. So that's why I'm basing it off of averages. Could a mistake happen? Yes, but its overall impact on these numbers would be so minuscule that it may affect the odds by fractions upon fractions of a percent. So it is something that is negligible and we can dismiss in this case. Looking at the Flawless, though, I was able to estimate that Leighton opened up 70 full cases. How I went about doing that is I just looked at their breaks and figured out roughly how many pick your team breaks that they did, how many random card breaks or how many full case breaks they did. And this was the number I came up with was 70. This also includes the personal boxes out there or any boxes that might have been involved in a mixer. Generally speaking, my rule of thumb was to add 10 to 20% of the boxes open in breaks to additionally account for the mixers and the personals. Is that a concrete number? No, but it's about as accurate as I can get it. And again, this isn't the number of product that backyard breaks open, but it is another very prominent breaker and how much they open. So that is how I came up with this 3% chance to pull the LeBron. Actually, Leighton did pull one of the better triple logo men out there. There's only 10 of the triple logo men, if I'm not mistaken, in the entire product, and they did pull one. So they did beat the odds as well because in 97 out of 100 examples, if you were to simulate this over and over, they wouldn't have pulled one of those cards. So, but in this case, they did hit on that 3% for that specific logo band, and so did if Backyard had opened the same amount, then they would have hit on that 3% chance on the LeBron card, which was again, this is the odds for this specific card. If you wanted to figure out what the odds were of hitting any of the 10 logo man, you could multiply these odds by 10, since there would be 10 successful outcomes out of the entire pool rather than just one. Since we're only looking for one specific card, we can only do a one chance. But if you wanted to see what their odds are of pulling any of the logo men, it would have been 1 in 453, which, while isn't great, is extremely realistic. Most people have opened boxes where they have pulled a card uh, that has greater than 1 in 453 odds before. So that would have been much more realistic. And you would almost expect them to pull a logo man. It wouldn't have been a foregone conclusion. In fact, it wouldn't have even been more than 50%, where that would be, I would say, then an expected outcome, but it would have been getting closer at that 30% mark. So wanted to clarify that. All right, let's go into the Optic and the Prism, because I think this is where there is a bit more gray area. And I think there is a few very important things to consider with this. The number one aspect of this that I decided to omit was the idea of numbered parallels as they relate to the inserts. Why I omitted this is because I wasn't sure which of the parallels were retail exclusives. If I am not mistaken, my house cards were exclusive to NBA retail for Optic this year. And I was not sure if the same was said for NFL Optic boxes, if the My House inserts were retail exclusives. And I feel like I have seen maybe some of the numbered parallels out there for the downtowns that have been hit out of retail. With that kind of doubt, I didn't want to add those cards in there if they would possibly dilute the overall odds of pulling these cards, the specific cards in the hobby products themselves, and therefore I omitted them. And even if I were to add the insert parallels into this formula here, it would make the odds even longer. And again, I was trying to give the benefit of the doubt wherever I could when presenting this data. I was trying to make the odds as great as they possibly could when taking all this into consideration. So that is one of the really key things I wanted to point out in this argument. Also, I was adding it up, and most of the parallels themselves from the retail, rough estimate is about, I want to say 15 to 20,000 parallels among just the inserts themselves. So if you look at that overall, it would add about less than 5% to the total number of parallels here, which in the grand scheme of things wouldn't have changed the odds too much. It would have made them a little bit longer. But for the most part, it wouldn't have really changed things all that much. It would have definitely made it harder for any breaker to pull this if they're opening this amount of product. But I decided to dismiss it in this case. Also, with Optic, there was one parallel that I was unsure of because I believe it is exclusive to a specific format and not available in hobby. That would be the orange scopes there, number 279. So again, that would be 23,700 parallels that would have been added to this overall number had I included the orange scopes, but I had suspicions that they were not in hobby, and to my knowledge, they are exclusive to some kind of format. If it's a mega box, if it's something, I'm unsure of exactly what that was, but just to give them, again, the benefit of the doubt and give them the best odds possible to pull those gold vinyls, I wanted to eliminate the orange scopes completely. So again, that could add to it, but at 23,000, that would be a significant increase. It would add about, roughly 5 to 10% to the overall number of parallels. But again, I did cut those out of there as well. The first off the line parallels, again, they are exclusive. They do not count against the 8 that you get in a box, and you get that same number regardless of whether or not it is a first off the line box or a hobby box. Are you guaranteed to get more low numbered stuff in a first off the line box outside of the exclusive parallels? I cannot say that definitively. In theory, that shouldn't be the case unless Panini is purposely stacking the first off the line boxes. Intuition would lead us to believe that, yeah, maybe so. I remember watching a lot of Origins first off the line boxes, and it felt like there were a lot of numbered RPAs that were put into the first off the line boxes, whereas there was a lot of non numbered ones put into the regular hobby boxes. But that would be 100% hearsay. I don't have any data to back that up. So I'm not going to make any of those claims, but we're just going to take the assumption that the odds are equal given that there is the same number of numbered parallels in both formats. I thought that was important to point out here. One thing that's probably not too relevant is this number of boxes out there. This was more so if people were just curious to see exactly how many boxes are out there in the grand scheme of things. If you divided this number by 12, you would get, in theory, the number of cases that are out there. It does result in a fraction, which is this is the one time that we kind of get this fraction when it should be a whole number. And that could be attributed to maybe some of the numbered parallels being put into retail, if that were the case, or a different format that I wasn't accounting for. Again, the number of those would be so small that it would be negligible, where it wouldn't have a impact on our data overall. It would be, again, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction if it had changed, if that was indeed the case. So that's how I came up with this number, and that's why it's not a whole number here. But I did make sure I subtracted out the first off the line boxes because my calculation, if I didn't do that, would have counted them twice, and therefore would have made the odds longer to have pulled the Trevor Lawrence card in this case. So wanted to clarify that as well. Another thing with this is that nobody's really opening flawless anymore, whereas Optic is still a relatively new product and Prism NBA is still relatively a new product. So there will likely be more and more of these products opened as time goes on, or they'll be involved in mixers or personals. But as of this time, I can estimate that there's about 25 cases that have been opened. And as I mentioned earlier on as well, there are some questions about, are there really 8 numbered parallels in a box? Could you potentially be shorted one, or could you get an extra one? Yeah, we've seen that happen before where Panini shorts it. Again, I have to go based off of the averages here. And I don't know how often an error box would fall. If it was significant enough, that could potentially skew the data. My suspicion would be that it would be such a small number where, again, the number of boxes that fall outside of this average would be negligible. And even if they did, they would likely be offset by another one. So, for example, if you got a box that was shorted a numbered parallel and someone else bought a box from the same case that had an extra one, well, those would kind of cancel out. It would still average out to 8 per box. So I thought that was negligible, and therefore I did not account for that in this. If you look at the overall pull rate here, this 0.08%, this is the odds of pulling any gold vinyl. It doesn't have to be a specific player, but just to get any of the ones from the base checklist. I did round down here. This is the one part where you could argue I didn't give them the benefit of the doubt. But this, I wouldn't feel comfortable rounding up from 2.14 to 3. That's why I rounded down. But if you were to give them that chance, if you give them that benefit of the doubt and rounded all the way up to 3, it would make it 1 in 100 odds. So a 1% chance to pull the Trevor Lawrence gold vinyl. Is there a huge difference between 1% and 0.667%? I mean, it's basically taking 50% of these odds and adding them on. So relative to this number, yes. In the grand scheme of things, no. So again, you're kind of splitting hairs at that point in time. It's still highly unlikely either way. You slice it to pull that specific Trevor Lawrence gold vinyl. But again, I wanted to put that out there just so you know that that is a potential issue that you could raise with this. Moving on to the Cade Cunningham one. Again, this one was a bit more difficult to determine which parallels are exclusive to which formats. I felt like I had a pretty good grasp of it. And also knowing that I don't have a specific number of numbered parallels in a box. I'm just going based off of what I have seen from Prism in the last few years, where there's typically at least one numbered parallel or excuse me, one non-numbered parallel per hobby pack. With 12 packs in a box, that gives us 10 numbered parallels. I know that I have seen boxes where there are like the red waves or something like that that are not numbered as well. So that would actually make the odds even worse. But to give, again, as good of odds as we possibly could get, I just took out the non-numbered parallel in every single pack and added in the numbered ones. And again, no inserts included in this. So theoretically, if the inserts are included within those parallels, if insert parallels count, well, then that would even further lengthen the odds, but the overall amount would change by less than 5% in terms of how much would be added to the parallels here. So is it a huge deal? No, but even if we were to include it, it would be working against our favor to actually pull these cards out, or the breaker's favor to pull out a specific card. So you can see here the number of parallels again that I broke down. This is to the best of my knowledge, all the ones that are in hobby and first off the line. I calculated the number of first off the line boxes again. And the total number of boxes out there isn't incredibly relevant to this. Again, this is just more so for fun to show you about how many boxes of these are out there so that you can get a general idea of how much of the product has been produced and kind of your ratios of how much is being ripped by Backyard. This also allows us to kind of figure out how often gold vinyls are pulled. That's one of the key reasons that I put that here. And I don't really explain that too well in the document, so I wanted to make sure I noted that in that video, that was really one of the big purposes of coming up with that number, but we could have made this calculation without it. I just thought that it may be interesting or relevant to some people, and that's why I included it here. Also, we take a look here. I'm estimating based on the price point of Optic, it's comparable in hobby box prices from my experience kind of watching the market to seeing where they're at. To Prism NBA, some of the lows and the highs on these boxes have been about the same, give or take a couple $100. And just based on how many boxes I was seeing open in the various formats, so random team breaks, pick your team breaks, half case breaks, or personal boxes, I added an additional 20% to it to account for all the miscellaneous boxes that might have been put in those personals or the mixers to get to the 25 full cases. And therefore, we can get to this number of parallels here. Again, I tried to give us the best odds possible and give us the most realistic number of cases. It is impossible to figure out right now how many cases exactly unless Backyard Breaks told us. And then again, we would just have to take their word for it if they told us how many boxes they opened. But for me, to my knowledge, there's really no way for me to definitively say, hey, this is the number of boxes that they opened up. But with that, again, it's really the same math as the gold vinyl here. You can see the odds are a little bit better to pull the Cade Cunningham compared to the Trevor Lawrence, but still not great. These are less than 1% odds. So it does look like the odds are significantly better from the original video. And that is true. I can say that I grossly overestimated also how often these fall per case, because I think in the original video, I had them at like 1 in every 4 to 5 cases, whereas these true one-of-ones of cards from the base set were actually falling in 1 in every 12 to 15 cases based on this data here. So that was actually an underestimate on my part, but that is offset largely by the high volume of this. You know, I counted for a lower basically how it works out is that I didn't account for how much of the product was actually produced. I was under on that, but I was more under on the number of boxes that the breakers were opening because I was only accounting for one case at a time. So you can see here, we're talking about 20 to 25 times more cases where I'm only saying that the print runs are actually 4 to 5 times higher than what they actually were in the original videos. So that way, that's more ground that was caught up by Backyard. I hope that makes sense. That probably wasn't the best explanation of that, but that is kind of one of the key differences here. So we move to the overall summary that I came up with in this document, and I decided to make it a base 100,000 odds. This is just for congruency's sake. Otherwise, it would have been 1 in 150. If you look at the logo man here, 1 in 4,530, and then also 1 in 110, just for the sake of getting all of these in the same, same denominator here, where we could put them in comparison to one another and figure out a common denominator. Here we have the percentages. So you can see I have 3 decimal places here. Basically taking a look at, if we were to simulate each of these examples of them opening these cases 100,000 times. And of course, they couldn't do this 100,000 times because there's just not enough product out there to repeat this process. Otherwise, that would be even beyond junk wax era level of print runs. But if we were to simulate them opening this amount of wax 100,000 times, this is how many times we would expect them to pull these specific cards. So you multiply that out. Here are the total number of outcomes in which that would happen. And this is the total number of simulations right here. So when we divide that out, we can take this. This is our decimal number here. So we move over by 2 places to get a percent. And then a little bit of cross multiplication here gives us the final odds at 555,000. So I put this down here. And one of the really key things that I want to note is that by comparison, these odds are significantly better than the original odds that I put out there. And I think that might give the impression that all of a sudden that this becomes realistic. But I'll tell you right now, 1 in 555,000 is not a very good probability. It seems really good comparatively, but it's still not great. And even if they had opened that, they being backyard breaks, double the amount of product that I gave in this estimate here, so either they doubled what they had opened up, which maybe they have, it would still be north of 1 in 250,000 odds to pull those 3 specific cards by the same person opening that amount of product. Even if they had opened 5 times as much as this estimate here, it would still be north of 1 in 100,000 odds to pull those 3 cards. And I only accounted for those 3 cards as well. This doesn't include the Cade Cunningham logo man. This doesn't include the Trevor Lawrence Gold Kaboom, the infamous one. It doesn't include any of those cards in this data. It's just these 3 because I felt that I could most accurately choose these 3 cards out there to make to make these calculations. Now, I'm going to put out there as well that, say that you took, for example, the cards that I have opened up and you saw maybe what my 3 best cards were that I pulled this year, and what would be the odds of pulling those cards from a product. And a little bit of rough math here. I don't have it in front of you, but it would be still a long shot. It would be probably, I'm trying to remember what I had in my head. I think like 1 in, it was a 5-figure number. Someone has to pull these cards, right? Someone has to win the lottery. Someone has to be struck by lightning. Someone has to catch a foul ball at a baseball game. It's just things that, like, yes, it's highly unlikely, but eventually someone does beat those odds. So is this a case of someone beating the odds? Well, it very well could be, because, I mean, very improbable events happen every single day. How improbable they are definitely varies. I'm not saying that these things, which would be short of a miracle, happen every single day, but crazier things have certainly happened. So is this definitive evidence that there are influencer boxes or these juiced cases or boxes are going to backyard? No, it is not definitive. I do not have a way to definitively prove this unless there was like an actual admittance from either party that this was actually going on. And again, I said this in the very first video. I highly doubt that would happen. In fact, I would give it less than these odds right here that would ever be publicly admitted like that. But like I said, crazier things have happened. So I am not going to come on here and say that, yes, this is 100% going on. Just as I did in the first video, I did not say that, yes, this is 100% going on. But the odds are extremely against this being a sheer coincidence. There is more statistical work that I could do with this. Um, it would really just reiterate a lot of these points here. I don't feel that they would add anything additional that we don't already know. All this information out there, anybody could have calculated this. I'm taking all public knowledge. I don't have any insider knowledge on any of this here. It's just kind of using the information that is out there to calculate the odds. It's not readily available. You kind of have to work a little bit to get to these numbers in terms of calculating out odds since we don't have pack odds. But this is the probably the most complete answer I can give when I posed that question the other day, and actually doing my due diligence and making sure that I crossed my T's and dotted my I's, accounted for as many variables as possible to come up with this number here. So again, the whole document is available. I have it linked on my channel under the community tab if you want to take a better look at it. But I did want to do a follow-up video here to explain how I came up with some of the numbers that I did and also examine the strengths and the weaknesses of my argument here and just clarify a few things that maybe don't come off as clearly over a document like this. So Sports Cart Radio is actually doing a live stream where they're going to be discussing this a bit more on Friday. I will not be able to attend the live stream, but I have given Ryan a link to this document here and told him, use it for whatever you need. I'm not out here trying to gain clout off of this here or anything. This is a subject that I have some passion about, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have spent this much time making these videos in the first place or creating this document here. Did I spend an exorbitant amount of time and dedicating all my resources to it? No, I didn't. Could I have? Yeah, if I really wanted to dig and really unearth everything I possibly could. But for the sake of time, this is really the best that I can come up with at this point in time. But I felt like it would have been a disservice to not follow up on the original video and explain some of my points here and clarify some things from the first video as well that maybe didn't paint a full picture or didn't have proper context behind it. So there you have it. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, let me know. I might be a little slow to respond to the comments, but I will make sure to get back to you here at some point. So yeah, appreciate you taking a look. Take care. Stay safe. Be kind.